Every year, thousands of people are reported missing. 95% are found, but some remain simply missing.
Ranelle Rose Bennett, a loving mother of two, vanishes without a trace just before her daughter's 10th birthday.
This is Simply Missing. We are your hosts. I am Neil Portman.
And I'm Andy Clark.
Our producers are Neil Portman and Andy Clark. Our theme song is Mystery Bazaar and Day of Chaos, used under attribution license by Kevin MacLeod. Ranelle Rose Bennett has been missing since June 15th, 2021. Ranelle had met with her mother, Rose Yazzie, to talk about Ranelle coming over to decorate for Ranelle's daughter's birthday. Ranelle's kids lived with their grandma, Rose Yazzie. Rose asked Ranelle if her boyfriend, Kendall Johnson, was in the bedroom. Ranelle said that he was. When Rose left, Ranelle gave her a long, tearful hug, which Rose found unusual. Ranelle never showed up to decorate the house. She also didn't show up for her daughter's birthday. This was also unusual. Ranelle's daughter kept looking out the window at every car that passed by, expecting her mom to show up, but she never did. Since then, there have been no phone calls, texts, or any other communication from Ranelle.
Rose Yazzie, Ranelle's mom, filed a missing persons report a few days later after still not hearing from her daughter, and none of Ranelle's kids had heard from her either, which is rare. Rose went to Ranelle's house in Hogback, New Mexico, and found it locked with no one home. When she filed a missing persons report, there were a few different hiccups with that, but one of the things that she found out early on was that KJ, who Ranelle was dating, his name's Kendall Johnson, that he is not a great guy. KJ and some of his associates were arrested in late July of the same year that Ranelle went missing for a variety of crimes, including home invasion and stealing cars. KJ fled with another suspect, and they were caught in Red Mesa, Arizona, which is about an hour west of Shiprock, which is where Rose and Ranelle's kids lived. Was in Shiprock, lived in Hogback, which is about 15 minutes away from there. As a result of that, they found out that the Navajo Nation police had been tracking Ranelle's cell phone to see if she was involved with Kendall, but they weren't confident that Ranelle's phone was actually in her possession the whole time. They thought maybe someone else had access to it and that the phone wasn't with Ranelle the whole time, so it wasn't a concrete piece of evidence of where she would have been leading up to her disappearance. It took the police more than a month to go visit Ranelle's home in Hogback, and Rose called the Shiprock Police Department to get an update on her daughter's case all the time. The first time, the investigators didn't know what she was talking about. They would tell her that the investigators were out of the office. She would go sit at the police department and wait for any updates, and they would just never give her any. 3 months after she went missing, her shoes and a sweater that she had were found in the north area of Shiprock. And then there's kind of conflicting points in articles that either the police were part of this search or just that the police came and collected them as evidence. But Rose says that the police haven't contacted her since with any updates as to what the shoes or sweater would have pointed them in any direction.
The shoes turn out to be significant because there is a rumor that KJ, for fun, would take his girlfriends out into the desert, take their shoes, and force them to walk back, which in the summertime in New Mexico can be the most pleasant thing. That makes you wonder if that's what he did to Ranelle, but we have no information from the police or any other source saying that they're looking at Kate or anybody else for that matter. So a lot of that is just conjecture at this point.
Ranelle's brother, Gerald Harrison, He lived in Colorado at the time of Ranelle's disappearance, and he actually moved back to Shiprock to help with search efforts and follow up on tips from community members and from online, because the police haven't been communicating that they're following up on any of those tips. And he said that he wished that the police would just come out with him and follow up on some of the tips that he's received, because it would seem more like they were doing their due diligence, basically protecting the community. Because if he gets into a bad situation, then he's left to figure out what to do on his own. And just that there hasn't been any updates or developments in this case. It's almost 3 years old now, which, I mean, people still have been found after this point in time in a case. It's not like the case took place 15 years ago and there's just nothing to update anymore. It's like it was 3 years ago, which is not that long in the grand scheme of police investigative work. And that if it is going to be a cold case or something at this point, that they could update the family and tell them that they've chosen to stop investigating. There's just been radio silence, it seems. Another thing we discovered from Ranelle's Facebook page that's worth mentioning, because it's still up to this day, is that one of the last posts she made before she disappeared was of a black vehicle that was parked up by a park, it sounded like, that she said was taking pictures and being odd around the kids. She posted pictures of the vehicle and the license plate. If anyone had any ill intent in that car, that would be another reason to make sure she disappeared.
The police had planned to search the area where KJ, Kendall Johnson, her boyfriend, last saw Bennet, which was supposedly after she disappeared. There's been no update to whether that search happened or what came out of it. Like we said before, there's no information from the police about if they suspect Kendall in this crime or somebody else. So we're left with a lot of mysteries at this point. The police thought that Ranelle Bennett may have been involved in crimes that Kendall was perpetrating, but they haven't said either way. There's no source that says if they suspect that she was involved or if she knew anything about those crimes. I probably should note they've only been dating, about a month before she disappeared, according to Rose, her mother.
So going back to the day that Ranelle disappeared, or the day that Rose last saw Ranelle alive, when she gave her mom a long hug, she was crying and she wouldn't say what was wrong. But KJ was in a back bedroom, so that could maybe be why Ranelle wouldn't have been able to tell her mom what was going on, if he was threatening her in some way or threatening her kids, or if she knew something bad was going to happen to her.
So not a ton of information on this case, but we do have some theories about it. And I'm starting with KJ, with his criminal record and the fact that he liked to take his girlfriends out into the desert and leave them to walk back. Statistically, it's often the significant other that's involved in a person's disappearance. That, I think, is the primary theory. It's probably what happened. It could be also that she saw something related to the crime, that she was going to turn him in, or he thought she was going to turn him in. Like we said before, we don't know if she was involved in the crime spree. And that's where my money's at. See what Andy has to say.
I'm on Neil's side here, but I feel like it is a possibility that she could have just left because of KJ or because of that truck she saw that was and posted online that was creeping on kids at the park. That maybe the tearful hug that she wouldn't say what was wrong was in a way a goodbye hug, that she knew she had to leave and disappear in order to protect her family from KJ or the other people could do, because at this point, KJ hadn't been introduced to her mom or to her kids. So in theory, he wouldn't have known them, and she would have been able to disappear and keep them safe. But we know that KJ's in prison now. It doesn't make sense for her to not have resurfaced if that's why she disappeared in the beginning. And that they said that Ranelle would call her kids at least once a day and is never gone for very long at any point in time of her kid's life. So it sounded like she was a pretty active and present mom, even though her mom is the one who had custody of the kids. So it doesn't make sense for her to just disappear unless something significant was going to happen to them if she showed up at the party and then showed someone where they lived, if someone was watching Ranelle. But that's a little more far-fetched than just it being KJ and some of his friends. I do feel like it's also worth noting that I think it was 2 of the people who were arrested in connection to KJ and that whole group were women. So there were 2 women helping out in this crime spree, which would be another possibility that she could have been involved too. They have a pretty significant crew, it sounded like, of people working together. But other than that, there isn't really any good ideas for what happened to her. And just based on the fact that her brother, Gerald, he's been investigating this, it seems like since she disappeared, and he hasn't come out with any theories or any evidence that he's found, at least that has been shown anywhere that we can find related to her disappearance. So it doesn't seem like there's anything else to really consider besides these 2.
I think you just hit on a point, though. There's 2 other women involved. It could be that she was involved and she ran because she thinks the police know that she was involved, even though police haven't said either way whether she was or she thought the police knew that she may run because of that. What do you think of the police work on this case? If you think back to Ashley Loring Heavy Runner, Nevaeh Kingbird, and Case Syrup Stops Pretty Places, you see the same pattern emerge. And you have to ask yourself, how many times do we have to see this? Police write off the victim as a runaway and don't get involved for weeks. And when they do, the level of effort is minimal. This leaves the family to take over the investigation. Like in the case of Ashley Loring Heavy Runner, it's her sister Kimberly. You think about the resources they pulled out for Gabby Petito. He had all this media coverage, major news networks, the FBI. I remember seeing pictures of the park and FBI trailers, literally trailers of equipment and resources that were applied. And here you don't even get the local police really looking. If they got the resources to do that for Gabby Petito, why don't they have the resources for this case? And they say, oh, we're resource bound, but obviously they have them because they use them when they want to. I get a little tired of hearing it. And I'm sure we're going to face more of these. So, yeah, it's a bit disheartening at times.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like they did very much to look for her. There's no reports of them doing any sort of canvassing to ask any neighbors if they saw anything. There's no definitive answer on what all they did when her shoes and jacket were found. And while it is possible that a lot of it is behind closed doors, that they're keeping it all under wraps to wow us with their investigative prowess later, I just don't see that being the case, especially since her brother uprooted his whole life to come back here to look for her. And still there's been nothing new come out about this case in the past 3 years. Almost every article that you can find about this case is the same information, just told in slightly different sentences. That all of the information comes from Ranelle's family members. It doesn't come from statements from the police. It's mostly her mom sharing her story and going to events and spreading this news about her daughter being missing, just like a lot of other cases that we've seen that we choose to focus on because of how little attention they get, especially from the press and mainstream media. It's very disheartening to just see it like over and over again, and to have sometimes we'll have a really long like conversation, lots of evidence to go through, but this is just one of those cases where there's hardly anything out there. Looking at this case and talking about this, Neil and I talked about the Idaho murders that happened a while back, and that kind of everybody made fun of the police for not really knowing what they were doing, but then they announced that they had caught a suspect and they had all this evidence and that it was just kept like super tightly under wraps. They didn't talk about it. None of it was leaked. And it was really impressive and awesome that they were able to catch the person who committed those crimes. We would both love for this case to be one of those situations, but there's no way that can be what's happening, especially at this point. Ranelle Rose Bennett, her nickname was Tiny, was last seen wearing an orange tank top and black joggers or sweatpants. She has Treasten, spelled Treasten, tattooed on her right inner forearm and the letter B tattooed behind her left ear.
Ranelle Rose Bennett is 33 years old. She's Native American. She's 5'2", weighs 125 pounds, has black hair and brown eyes. She was last seen on June 15th, 2021 at her home in Hogback, New Mexico. If you have any information, please call the Navajo Police Department, Shiprock District at 505-1350 or 911. Our next episode will be on Asia Degree, a slightly more well-known case than this one, but also a case with much better police coverage. Thank you all for listening. Please comment if you have any theories about what happened to Ranelle or any other case that we covered.